Now, the historical 70-year period that God began judging his own people, Judah, took place initially in 609 BC. At first, Babylonians weren't in view. It was the Egyptians. When good King Josiah died in 609 BC against the Egyptians, that is when the 70-year period started. And it would continue until 539 BC, when the Medes and the Persians would conquer Babylon. And then there was a decree by Cyrus to allow the Jews to return home. And this is the 70 years God is referring to, a judgment on his people Judah. And that 70 years represents the Great Tribulation period, the judgment on the churches. God uses several different time periods to represent the Great Tribulation. In the days of Joseph, the 7-year famine typified the Great Tribulation. In the days of Samuel, in 1 Samuel, the Ark of the Covenant was taken captive by the Philistines for 7 months. That 7-month period represents the Great Tribulation. And there is the 70 years that are mentioned several times in the Old Testament. For instance, in Zechariah chapter 1, it says in verse 12, "Then the angel of Jehovah answered and said, O Jehovah of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast had indignation these 70 years? Actually, that should be those 70 years, as the Hebrew word there can be translated also as those, and is translated that way. In Zechariah chapter 7, verse 5, "Speak unto all the people of the land and to the priests, saying, When ye fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th month, even those 70 years, did ye at all fast unto me, even to me?" And that's referring to the same period of time, to the time when God's wrath was upon Judah, from 609 BC until 539 BC. It is the 70-year period that we find mentioned here with spiritual language in Isaiah 23. It says in verse 15, "And it shall come to pass in that day that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years. Tyre would be a figure of the church. "According to the days of one king, after the end of 70 years shall Tyre sing as a harlot. Take a harp, go about the city, thou harlot that has been forgotten. Make sweet melody, sing many songs, that thou mayest be remembered. And it shall come to pass after the end of 70 years that Jehovah will visit Tyre, and she shall turn to her hire, and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth." And it's some very interesting language God is using. It's speaking of that 70-year period. The 70-year period, again, we need to be aware of this, is a picture of the Great Tribulation period. And in Isaiah 23, God is using language that is speaking of a period after the 70 years, when Tyre then commits fornication with all the nations. And I believe the language in Isaiah 23 is difficult, but it could be pointing to the church who is still in existence after the judgment time that God had ordained, a period of 23 actual years from May 21, 1988 to May 21, 2011. That time has elapsed, and yet the church is still operating in the world, and yet committing fornication with all the nations of the world. We could say spiritual fornication. Well, there's other references, but the 70 years that God raises up the king of Babylon and brings him against his own people, views the king of Babylon as his servant, is picturing the triumphant, victorious conquest of the church by Satan according to the will of God, as God loosed him to accomplish that purpose of bringing that spiritual destruction to the churches and making them a desolate land, spiritually speaking. And this is a glorious time for Satan. He is winning. And the people of the world think that he is overcoming. His deadly wound in their eyes was healed. He has been loosed. He is stronger than ever. And yet God's plan is to punish him after he completes the task of judging the churches, or being an instrument of God's judgment upon the churches.